The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Welcome into an all-new edition of the Belly Up Fantasy Live Baseball Show, and we welcome in especially Philadelphia Phillies and Kansas City Royals fans as their football seasons have come to an end, as has everybody else's to this point in the season. And of course, the air is a little crisper, the sun is a little brighter, and the smell of sunflower seeds are in the air as baseball officially has stepped to the plate. Pitchers and catchers reporting this week. And of course, there's a lot of other things going on in the sports world too, but tonight's focus is all baseball. I'm Vince Stover, joined as I am every week by the senior writer at bellyupsports.com, Kevin Wilson. Hey, Kevin, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Vince. And as you mentioned, that now that the Super Bowl is behind us, baseball is on the runway, and they have been given the clearance for takeoff. So it's time to get excited. And as you mentioned, that the camps will be opening soon. And early plug that I've got a story out there that has all that information on the Belly Up Sports website. When does pitchers report? When do the full squads report? And that's just a few days away now. So it's time to get excited.
It is indeed. Well, we got a lot to talk about today. We're going to be looking at several different topics. So the focus of the show today will be our shortstop rankings at the end of the program. We're also previewing each team in the NL West. And we get our show started off, though, with the fantasy segment we call the Fantasy Burner. The Fantasy Burner is presented by bellyupsports.com. As Kevin just mentioned, his latest article is available at bellyupsports.com, as well as articles around the Super Bowl, the draft, NHL, NBA, MLB. There's all kinds of stuff going on, as well as fantasy sports, of course, also at bellyupsports.com. Today's Fantasy Burner, we're looking at players that have changed teams and kind of their fantasy impact that goes along with that. So let's get things kicked off. And Kevin, we'll let you start with the first person you think is going to have a good impact on in his new location.
Okay, so there are a lot of obvious guys that we are going to get into, but the first guy that I'm going to talk about is pitches now for a team in LA, but I'm not talking about the Dodgers, at least not yet. But the guy I'm going to lead off with is Yusei Kikuchi, now pitching for the Angels. And as we know, he started his season off last year on Toronto. He was awful, 4.94.75. Well, Toronto shedded him to Houston. He went over there, went 5-1 with a 2.70 ERA in 10 starts. He kicked up his strikeouts per percentage. I don't know what Houston saw, but they straightened him out. I think he's going to take that over to the Angels, and he's going to be I'm suspecting he's going to be their number one starter. And so this is the guy right here that's number 47 overall. Oh, number 47 pitcher, I'm sorry, and 150th overall. So this is a guy that you could take later on in your draft, potentially a number one starter. And so if you wind up with him later in on your starting rotation, I think you're on your way to having a very, very solid pitching staff. I'm really looking forward to see, even though he's on the Angels. I understand you got to temper that just a bit, but other than that, I think this guy is going to have a big season.
I'm intrigued by that name. I looked at Kikuchi. I ended up leaving him off my list, mainly because he's playing for the Angels. That's the main. See him more as a streamer because he plays for the Angels. His last 3 seasons have been decent. His last in 2023, 32 games, 167.2 innings pitched. He's pitched 175 last year, 157 back in 2021. His Ks per 9 are pretty decent. They've gone up a little bit throughout his career, and 22 was his highest year in that. But I look at him, he's 34 coming into the season, or will be 34 this season. He plays for the Angels. I liked Kikuchi last year, especially when he went to Houston. I'm a little scared of him this year, to be honest with you, Kevin. And he might be a guy that you can get at a better value than I'm willing to go for in
That's okay.
Kikuchi this year. And I'll
Is that
admit, though, I get that mid 30s. There are some guys who hit their stride in the mid 30s, and guys we talked about last week specifically have hit their strides in their mid 30s. So, maybe he's here. He's only played in the major league since 2019, came in as a 28-year-old rookie. So he's 34, but he's not necessarily 34 baseball 34, So
right?
I'm intrigued by him. I'd be willing to take him, but I admit I'm probably going to want to wait a little longer than what he's going to be on the board for me to take this year. But I like the name. I think there's a lot of intrigue around him to see what he can do. Because when we get to the Angels and our preview teams, I'm kind of higher on them probably than most people. So Kikuchi might be a perfect fit, there. Let's go. I'm going to go to an obvious guy in Boston, and that is Garrett Crochet. He comes over, and one of the things that I'm always a little leery of is high expectations. When you put high expectations on a player who did not have the exterior high expectations before, I usually tend to stay away from those guys. When I look at Garrett Crochet, he's 26, and his resume in fantasy baseball is very, very small. Like, there's not much to go off of when you're looking at Garrett Crochet. So when I'm looking at him this year, and there's all the red flags for me, right? There's the a new place to pitch. Now, granted, it's still in the AL, which I think is a positive thing, because he's going to see some people that he's already seen, even though it's a different division. And we'll talk about that when we get to another pitcher later on. But with Garrett Crochet, I think at his age, I think at what he showed us last year, I have a little bit more confidence in him than I would in most people when it comes to these kinds of changes, especially when it comes to expectations. Because with the White Sox, there was never great expectations, right? He last year started for the first time in his Major League Baseball career. He had pitched in the major leagues for almost 4 seasons, but 3 seasons, at least partially. But he had always come out of the bullpen. He hadn't started a single game. He comes in, he starts 32 games. He goes 146 innings. His Ks per 9 is 12.88 last season, which is clearly the highest it's ever been in his career. In the 5 games he pitched in 2020 as a 21-year-old rookie, he had a 12.0. So he's been high in his career in a good way. But what he really was able to do last year was he dropped his walks per 9. He went from 9.24 to 2.03 walks per 9 last season. So again, he's still really young. He's still got a very fresh arm. Going to Boston, there's going to be some nights, I think, that are kind of look bad. But I think overall, going to Boston is going to help him because now he's going to have the offense support that he did not have in Chicago. In those 32 games that he started last season, 11 of those were quality starts, which I think is a pretty solid number. But he was 6-12. And so in Boston, he's not going to be 6-12. It'll be a bad year if he has if he's not over 500, and I think he will be this year in Boston as well. So originally I thought I want to be cautious on Garrett Crochet. The more I looked at it, I said, you know what? No, I'm in on Garrett Crochet. I think this is a massive improvement for him. Health is always the issue with pitchers. It's why I don't value pitchers the same way I value the offensive guys. But I think Garrett Crochet has the potential to be a superstar in Boston.
Well, I'm taking a little more cautious approach with him simply because, as you mentioned, he does have an injury past, and the White Sox, they curtailed his innings severely going down the stretch, so we don't know for sure how he's going to stretch out. And but that strikeouts per 9 that you mentioned you got to take notice of that. And so I think that he's going to come off the board just a little earlier than I'm willing to invest in that. But he's going to be a solid pitcher, I think. So I'm not all the way out on him. Just I need a little more push to the middle, if you will, put my chips
Sure.
in the middle. So we'll see how he looks in the spring, and who knows, on draft day he might be a standout. But right now, I'm still on the sidelines a little bit on him.
I got no problem with that. Let's flip to the offensive side. You got a batter that you like that you think is going to have a positive improvement in his fantasy value with his new team?
I do, and this is a guy right here who came off the waiver wire and became an all-star. And the guy that I'm talking about is Jurickson Profar.
Okay.
Went from the Padres to Atlanta. So that's about as in Atlanta, everybody was hurt and their offense was down, but we all think that they're going to bounce back. So you plug him into that lineup, and this is the guy right here who played in 158 games last year, so he'll be in your lineup. And so he hit 24 homers, 85 RBIs. And so everything that you could add, he has 3 homer seasons in his career. And so he's coming off the board at 152 overall. So go for waiver wire at 152. That's also the right around the 15th round or so, maybe 14, somewhere in there. If you can get an Atlanta Braves outfielder at the 14th or 15th round, that's something I think you've got to pay attention to. He's going to be in their lineup, and I really like what he can do over there. And so I'm very excited to see what he can do in Atlanta. So he's a guy that I look to really step it up and have a huge impact on your offense. So I really like him going into this season.
I'm glad you mentioned him. He's not on my list because I just had a pretty full list and I just decided not to keep going. So I'm glad you mentioned him because I think he deserves to be mentioned. I agree with you. I'm in on Jurickson Profar this year. I think he has a really, really good season in Atlanta as well. I'm going to go with another guy that, stat wise, this won't be a shocker to anyone, but Anthony Santander in Toronto this year, making the move from Baltimore. He's only going to be 30 years old this season. If you look at the last 3 seasons, it has just been so consistent. He's gotten so much similar numbers. In 2022, 647 plate appearances. 2023, 656, and last year, 665. So slightly climbing in those years. Last year, he was nuts, 44 home runs. I don't think he's going to copy that this season. So as far as being an improvement, maybe not. But he's going to be up there again. He'll be mid-30s at least in home runs. He had 91 RBIs, 102 RBIs last season as well. And then when you look at everything else, you kind of try to figure out his batting average dipped last year. It was the lowest it had been since 2018. I think that comes back up this season personally. So I'm excited to see kind of where that goes. I just think Anthony Santander puts himself into a spot where he becomes more of a focal point versus the young guns coming up in Baltimore. Like he's going to get a little bit more of the pat on the back than maybe he got in Baltimore in these last couple of years, even though I think they liked him. I think they respected him. But I think now he's kind of going to be looked at as one of the guys, even though Vlad, of course, is there and there's other guys there. But I think he's the big offseason addition for them. And I think we're going to see that play out in a really, really nice way this season for him. I'd like to see him, take a few less swings, not strike out, but that's with every single player we talk about. And actually his number decreased last year from 2023. And I'm trying to see, it's one of his lowest. Let's see here. Second lowest in the last several years. So I think this is going to be a positive step for Santander. I think he's going to come in, have a huge impact for the team. And fantasy-wise, I think I like him better this year fantasy-wise than I liked him going into the season last year. I see him as a higher pick this year than in past years. So I think he's established himself as now one of the the top tier of fantasy baseball players.
Well, the thing that I really like about him and is that he went from Baltimore to Toronto. And there's a player that I have on my list that's going to go down because he went to Baltimore. And there's a reason why I'm going to say that in a minute. But I really like that he's now in Toronto. And so I think that park's going to help him. So put all your chips on him. I'm definitely down on him making a huge impact up there in Toronto. And simply because he's got a first baseman that's going to, I'm not sure if he's going to hit in front or back of him. Doesn't really matter. But I like that lineup a lot. So Santander is a guy that I had on my team a year ago. So I was quite pleased with the season he had. So I like him a lot.
Love it. All right, let's go to the negative side. Do you have a pitcher that you say is going to be negatively impacted by his move to situation?
I have one, but I didn't really find a whole lot of pitchers that changed team that I'm going to downgrade a whole lot. But there is one. And he's not a major guy or anything like that. But the guy I'm going to talk about is Marcus Stroman.
Okay.
Went from the Yankees over to the Mets. So he stayed in New York, and that's all fine and dandy. But 10-9 with a 4.31 ERA, not getting it done. His ERA has gone up every year since 2021. And so it's not like you're going to have to make a huge investment in him to begin with, but I don't like any investment in him at all. I don't like him pitching in that ballpark. And so when it comes to Marcus Stroman, I am out on him altogether this year. And so you can have him if you want.
Okay. I think I'll use Jesus Luzardo in this spot because Jesus Luzardo goes to Philadelphia, which should be an automatic bump. And it probably will be. When it first happened, I said, this is going to be great. I can get Luzardo in every league I'm in. I can get him at a great value. He's in a great spot. So then I start doing some research. And I go, okay, maybe I don't want Luzardo in every league that I'm in. I'm still going to take a swing on him in some leagues for sure, as I do love this move for him to Philadelphia. But the biggest issue is at 27, he's had injury issues. He's not pitched a whole lot. Outside of 2023, he pitched 100 innings in 22, 95 in 21, 66 last season in Miami. In 2023, started 32 games, 178.2 innings. And those are the numbers you want out of Jesus Luzardo. I think if he gives you 130, then you have won with him. It's been worth having him on your team, but he's never been over 100 outside of that 2023 178 games. He was right at 100 innings in 2022. So there's a big gap there. And so even being in a better situation, even having much better offense around him to give him some support, for me, the concern is injury. And again, I go back to it. When I'm looking at pitchers, one of the reasons why I'm afraid to take them at number one is because if a pitcher gets injured, it ruins my whole season. If a hitter gets injured, I can replace them. Even one of the great ones, I can replace them for the most part. If Shohei goes down, that's one thing. But for the most part, I can survive a hitter going down. But if my number one pick is a pitcher, Kevin, I know you know the pain of this, and he gets hurt. I mean, it ruins your whole season. And so Luzardo, even though he's not going to get picked number one, even though he'd be way down the draft board, this is a guy that if you're going to pick him, you have to realize I'm probably going to have to replace him at some point because the chances of him staying healthy are very, very slim. But he is 27, so that plays in his favor as well. He's on a much better team, but I was really excited about this move to Philadelphia for Luzardo, and now I'm going, maybe I'm not quite as excited as I thought I was moving into it.
Well, I certainly know what you're talking about because 5th overall pick last year, Spencer Strider.
Yeah.
And we all know how that worked. So I'm right there with you on that.
Kevin, give me a quick rundown of some guys, positive or negative. Let's not go through all the stats on it.
Okay, so what I want to do, though, is touch on, because I mentioned Baltimore. And so the guy that I have going down, we talked about him last week, and that's Tyler O'Neill. This is why. Okay, so last year in Boston had the 4th highest run factor. Goes to Baltimore. There are only 5 teams that are worse as far as runs are concerned. And when it comes to home runs, it's the worst park in baseball. The worst. So he's going from a situation where he can sit there and take target at the hot, Green Monster. There is no Green Monster in Baltimore. They've been trying to move them fences back like every year, but it's they can move them to the infield, it seems like. But that park, I don't like it. I don't like him in that park at all. And so as far as me giving any kind of draft capital to him, not going to happen, especially if all these young players there we talked about, I think that pushes him down in the lineup. I don't like Tyler O'Neill in Baltimore at all.
I like that. I like that pick. I'm definitely higher on O'Neill than you. I have been this whole time. But again, he's not a guy that I'm going out to get necessarily. If I see him there and I like him at that value, I will take him. I'm not afraid of him, at least at that point. Let me run through some guys real quick. You can give your thoughts on these two. Christian Walker goes to Houston. He's 34 years old. He's got really high strikeout numbers. For this is probably the first time in a couple of years that I'm going to say I'm not out on Christian Walker, but I'm probably not going to draft him as high as some other people. I'm probably not going to end up with Christian Walker very often on my team, just because change can be good, can be a good thing for him. I'm intrigued to see where he goes out. Do you think Walker's up or down this year?
I think that's pretty much a lateral move.
Yeah,
and so we've seen what he's capable of. So I think that he's going to provide the exact same kind of season he had last year in Arizona.
I like it. Jake Berger, we've talked about, we'll continue to talk about in Texas. He's going to get a lot more at bats. His stats are going to get a lot better.
Yes.
He's probably the easiest to say. His stats are going to go way up this year. His value goes up this year in Texas.
I agree 100% on that.
Juan Soto, unilateral move there also.
Unilateral is
positive.
Unilateral's a good, especially now that they've got Alonso back in that lineup. He's just going to do what Juan Soto does.
Yeah.
And so you've got the number 2 pick in the draft. You got to consider him right there to me.
All right. Kyle Tucker goes to the Cubs. Again, another guy, when you look at his stats, fantasy, he's been very fantasy relevant. I've said it before. He's my Austin Eckler. I refused to draft Austin Eckler in fantasy football all these years. Obviously, now Eckler's a different player, but back in his Charger days, I just couldn't do it. I didn't have a good reason for it. I just couldn't do it. Kyle Tucker was that for me in Houston. I just couldn't do it. I could never get on board with Kyle Tucker. Now, he's in Chicago. So here's the deal. If you look at his games played each season, it's not good. He's missed games and a fair amount of games, a lot. So that worries me. And again, this is what I was talking about earlier, high expectations. He comes to Chicago. He's supposed to be the savior out there. Cody Bellinger didn't work. He's supposed to be the guy. I'm not sure. I'm not sold on Chicago. And I know I'm a Brewers fan, and that taints it. But listen, I think Tucker, he's going to be fine. He's going to be fantasy relevant. I don't think he's going to be the superstar the Cubs hope he's going to be.
I think he's the more complete hitter than Cody Bellinger, especially now at this point. But you're going to have to put a lot of draft capital into him. And so I don't think that I'd be willing to do that either. I like him more than you, but as far as taking him, probably going to have to go off the board in the first round, maybe the start of the second. That's a little steep for me.
Yeah, I'd have to get him in the 7th in order for me to take him. And I know
I'm not going to, I wouldn't wait that
long. And then last batter, Willy Adames goes to San Francisco. Listen, I don't know. You may know this. If you know this, then don't answer the question. But do you know how old Willy Adames is?
I had him written down because we were going to talk about him. He's not that old. Was he 29?
29 years old.
Okay, that's what I thought. And it seems like he's been around for 100 years.
I'm a Brewers fan, and I thought he was in his mid-30s. So
that's what it's sworn to say.
So there you go. He's 29. He did come in young. He's 29. He strikes out a ton, but he has really great power for the position, especially. My dad asked me when he traded to San Francisco, or when he signed with San Francisco, this is great. And I said, it's good. You're going to like Willie. Willie's a great guy. You're going to love his personality. He's going to hit home runs. He's going to strike out a ton. Fantasy wise, we're talking shortstops today, so we'll get the rankings with him a little bit more later. I think he's kind of what we talked about, unilateral to a degree in San Francisco. I think you're going to see some numbers go up, some numbers go down. So I don't think he's going to be drastically different in his total output this year in San Francisco.
I think that he's going to take a step back simply because 2 reasons. One, San Francisco is a pitcher's park, and he doesn't have the lineup that he had. And so you're going to have to take him. I like him.
Yeah.
Maybe not as much as you, but I like him. But, especially we're going to talk about shortstops in a minute, and that's a pretty deep position. So I probably wouldn't be willing to put in the draft capital on him that you'd need to get him.
I've got some other pitchers, but they're both in the West, so we'll talk about them later. Real quick, though, Devin Williams. He goes to New York, 30 years old. His career ERA is 1.83. He's averaging around 60 innings a season right now. I'm hesitant on Devin Williams, and I love Devin Williams. I'm hesitant, though, because when Josh Hader got traded, his career went a different path. He was the guy in Milwaukee, the closer. He goes to San Diego, and it just falls off the face of the earth, it seemed like. Now Devin Williams moves. The Yankees are a different team than San Diego for sure. And again, there's a lot of positive there. I think Devin Williams has a really good season this season. I don't think he's going to be a long-term guy in New York as far as sustained success for the next 4 or 5 seasons. But I think this season he'll still be really good.
I think so, and he is a right-handed pitcher, and that could be a problem in New York because of that short porch out there. But I'm not a big relievers guy, but if I was pitching for the Yankees, I would think you have to take a shot at that.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know. We got a long time before we get to relief pitchers. I'm not sure where I'm at yet on my relief pitcher strategy.
Yeah, I'm not either, just simply because I'm not a relievers guy on my team to begin with. So may not want to listen to me on that in the first place.
All right. That's the Fantasy Burner segment. It went 12 minutes longer than I was hoping it would go, but that's okay. Good conversation. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to transition to the hot corner to talk about some Major League Baseball news and preview the NL West.
Righteous Felon Craft Jerky is the official jerky of Belly Up Sports. For over a decade, Righteous Felon Craft Jerky has led the American meat snack revolution by concocting delicious, adventurous, U.S.-sourced jerky recipes for uncompromising carnivores across the country. With 15 different flavors to choose from, Righteous Felon has all jerky lovers covered, and by using promo code BELLYUP, you will get 15% off your purchase at righteousfelon.com. Do your taste buds a favor today and rip into a bag of Righteous Felon jerky.
Welcome in back to the Belly Up Fantasy Live Baseball Show. It is now segment number 2, the Hot Corner, presented by Righteous Felon Jerky. And what do we have here? That's right, a bag from Righteous Felon, tangy teriyaki with a punch of pepper. It's becoming one of my new favorite flavors. I still like the bootleg and barbecue the best, but that teriyaki Balboa is pretty good. I saw it in a TSC, Tractor Supply Company store, and grab me a bag. So
Okay.
Get a little cheaper if I order it online, but I just couldn't resist. So nonetheless, find your new favorite flavor at righteousfelon.com. Promo code BELLYUP. Get you 15% off your purchase. Real quick, let's hit some news before we get to the NL West. Pete Alonso, you mentioned it a second ago, back in New York. Not a huge surprise because it seemed like his options were pretty slim. But what's your thoughts on Alonso re-signing with the Mets and how it all turned out?
Well, I'm sure that it didn't turn out the way he thought it was going to turn out. At least for him, he's going to be in camp before camp even starts. So that's a positive for him. And so he's got the it's a opt out after 1 year. I like that. I think he's going to go up there and do some Pete Alonso things. So I was initially, I don't know what to make out of Pete Alonso because don't know where he's going to go, when he's going to go. And so now that he's going to be in camp, let's do it. So I like that he's in camp now instead of 2 days before the season begins.
I think it worked out great for the Mets. I think it worked out okay for Pete Alonso. The situation's fine. He's in a team. They've made some good additions. There's some positive things about the Mets. They had a great year, end of the year, especially last year. So I think it worked out fine for Alonso. I think it worked out great for the Mets. They're not paying a lot of money. It's only a 1 year basically deal. And if he loves it with Juan Soto there and he loves what they're doing, maybe next year it's easier to re-sign him and to kind of finish out his career there. Who knows? But I think that it works out really well for both parties for this season for sure. One of the stranger news things that happened in Major League Baseball was the announcement that Pat Hoiberg, the umpire, had been fired from officiating due to some gambling issues. And on the same week that we see that the interpreter for Shohei is sentenced to prison, we see this guy getting out. He's not going to get arrested or anything, but he gets fired for being tied to a gambling account. And I am surprised we haven't seen more of this, to be completely honest with you. And I wish that Pat Hoiberg would have been a different umpire, one of the ones that we already didn't like.
Yeah, right.
As well. What do you make of the Pat Hoiberg story?
Well, to be honest, I never heard of his name until that story broke. But they were quick to point out that he is a solid umpire.
Yeah.
So that's unfortunate because baseball can use all this, the positive umpiring that they can get, just like any other sport. But when it comes, you just can't do that.
Yeah,
you can't. If I'm in a position, like in the position I'm currently in, if I was caught using drugs, let's say, not that I do, okay, I don't, but if I was to do that, knowing because I could get drug tested anytime, and I did that and got drug tested, yeah, it's my own fault.
Right.
And that's the same scenario that this guy is in, knowing that you just can't do this. And so I'm sorry that he was a great umpire. That's where I'm sorry about. I'm not sorry about what happened to him because he's got to know better.
And listen, you said it perfectly without even knowing you said it perfectly. You didn't know his name. That means he's a good umpire.
Perfect.
Yeah. That's the way it's supposed to be. If you know the umpire's name, it's because one of two things: he's been doing it forever, or he stinks. And we have too many umpires right now that stink, and they fire the one of them that don't stink, and that stinks. So yeah, that is what it is. Interesting story for sure. There were a couple other signings this week. Mancini to the Diamondbacks. Connor Joe to San Diego. That's might actually be a really sneaky good signing there. And Moncada with the Angels. So when we get to the Angels, another again, doesn't blow the doors off, but that's actually not a bad signing in LA either. So some positive things going on there. All right, let's get into each week now. We're previewing divisions. Last week we looked at the AL East. This week we are in the National League West. And let me pull mine up here. We're going to start off with the Arizona Diamondbacks. And let's see here. Last season, the Diamondbacks were 89-73. Really, through most of the season, underperformed. But they stuck around long enough to be able to finish off the season solid and, of course, find the playoffs. When you look at their pitching, absolutely stacked in the starter rotation. Now, we'll going to get to the Dodgers in a bit. This is the closest team when it comes to the rotation to what the Dodgers are throwing out there this year. Corbin Burns comes over. Zach Gallen's still there. Merrill Kelly, we talked about a couple weeks ago. Eduardo Rodriguez, Brandon Pfaadt, Jordan Montgomery, and even the young Ryan Nelson available if people get injured and different things happen as well. I really like the rotation here in Arizona. Kevin, and I'm interested to get your thoughts. We'll start there with the starting pitching in Arizona because it really is a very stacked unit.
Especially, when you got Gallen, okay, who's a number one starter. He's a number one starter. But now that they've got Corbin, he might be a number two starter. Right. And so that's a solid start right there. I like their guys. And, the one that I think this whole thing pins on is Jordan Montgomery.
Yeah.
And so I know that the owner himself came out and said, well, we don't want Jordan Montgomery. Well, Jordan Montgomery said, well, that's just too bad. as he signed the 1 year, and so he's there. I saw, especially because I'm in Texas, I saw what he did on the Rangers, so I know what he's capable of doing. I think he's gonna, if he's anywhere close to that, this is a solid rotation that I put right behind, maybe even with, because we know these guys, the Dodgers. We don't necessarily know what their rotation is going to be yet, but I like this rotation an awful lot.
Corbin Burnes has only been over 3.00 ERA twice in his career. And when he's been over it, it hasn't been by a lot. The one thing that you'll notice about Corbin Burnes is his strikeout rate is dropping.
That's a concern.
He's still winning games. He's still really solid. He's changed his repertoire up a little bit. So he's not just attacking people with fastballs like he was doing early in his career. So I'm not super worried about it, but it is something to be aware of. The strikeouts are going down at this point in Corbin Burnes' career, so be aware of that. The bullpen scares me in Arizona, though. The startings, I love. AJ Puck comes over in the bullpen. Kevin Gannell's supposed to be, one of the guys over there. I would have liked to have seen them make a move at the back end other than AJ Puck, in my opinion. How do you feel about the bullpen in Arizona?
Well, when we talk about how you're on the straight and narrow when it comes to the starting pitching, the relief, not so much. And I think Puck can be a serious acquisition for them. And so we'll see about that. If he is, then all the question marks go away. But I'm not as big. How can you be as big on their bullpen as on their starters? So that's the position right there. If they can get anything out of that position, their pitching staff set.
Yeah. Offensively, their projected lineup goes Corbin Carroll 1, who we'll get to. I'm all in on Corbin Carroll. Okay. I'm 23 years old. I know last year stunk. I'm in on him. Ketel Marte had a great season. We talked about him last week at second base. Josh Naylor comes over as the new first baseman. He's younger than what they had at Christian Walker. He's got a bat on him. Lourdes Gurriel had a really good season last year. Jake McCarthy, still really young and loads of potential. Eugenio Suarez, older than dirt, but still doing everything he's got to do. Pavin Smith at DH, Gabriel Moreno at catcher, and Geraldo Perdomo at shortstop is the projected lineup there in Arizona. Not overpowering, but at the same time, all kinds of potential in that lineup.
They do, and we could have talked about Naylor when we're talking about new teams, big impacts. I think that's going to be a huge impact, and they did about as well. Walker leaves. That's about as well as you can do, adding someone to replace him. I think he's going to be fine in that lineup. Corbin Carroll, as you mentioned, is the key to that. He needs to forget the second year ever happened, and just keep on rolling after that. And Gabriel Moreno is a guy I was big on last year, not so much anymore, but he's still young. Yeah. So I think that this offense is going to be okay. Marte, solid. And so they had no problem scoring runs in Arizona a year ago.
Right.
And I think that's going to be the same case this year. So you add all this up, their starters and their offense, I think this is a solid baseball team.
It's a team that if the young guys are anywhere close to their potential, they'll be nearly unstoppable. I mean, if McCarthy shows up finally, if Corbin Carroll is back to the superstar ways that he looked like his rookie year, there is Gabriel Moreno. If he steps up this season again, still really young, my goodness, what can they be? What's interesting is their win total dropped. So last year they won 89 games. Their win total's at 85.5 this year. And I'll be quite honest with you, to me, that's an easy over. I'm at 85.5.
I'm sure we're not going to talk about anybody's over-under that's easier to peg than this one is. I don't understand the backwards motion on this, going from 89 to 85. That makes no sense. I'm going way over on this one. And so, if I had money to put down, this would be where I would go. It's going over 85. It's going over. I wouldn't be surprised if it's in the 90s.
If you're a gambler, here is my advice: take it or leave it. Throw something on the Diamondbacks for World Series champions, because the Dodgers are going to be the overwhelming favorite, no doubt about it. But this team, and they will make a move at some point in the season if their bullpen doesn't do what it needs to do. They have too much talent on this team to say, no, they're not going to be there. So I think they're not the favorites, but that's why you throw a little bit on there, is because, well, they're big underdogs and they are a stacked team there. So we're both over on the Diamondbacks for sure. I like
Over
that.
Way big on that. And so take it.
All right. Let's go the opposite end of the spectrum. Colorado Rockies. Last year when me and Dad were doing MLB previews, we just kind of basically read through the team and then skipped it. We went on to the next team. We won't necessarily do that today, but we're going to be pretty close to it. 61 and 101 last season. Pitching for the Rockies, Yerman Marquez, Ryan Feltner, Kyle Freeland, Antonio Senzatella, Austin Gomber. Then you might see some Bradley Blaylock or Jake Woodford, as well this season. Do any of those names excite you?
They do not.
Yeah.
If they pitched at sea level, maybe a little. Gomber, being one of them, but pitching in Colorado, that's a disaster. That's Titanic all the way around.
Projections have only one of those pitchers sub 5 ERA, and that one at 4.93. So, no one's expecting much out of this team. Bullpen isn't any better. Maybe Angel Shavili as a closer, but if you have ever listened to me and Kevin, you will know we stay clear of Colorado pitchers, especially when they're playing at home. And you'll hear that all season long as we go through the season. Offensively, it doesn't really get a whole lot better. Jacob Stallings comes over at catcher. First base, Michael Toglia has some fantasy relevance. Second base, Thairo Estrada comes over from San Francisco. Ezekiel Tovar, the young guy at short. Ryan McMahon still there at third base. Thought he might get traded this offseason. Brenton Doyle, let's see here. Nolan Jones and Sam Hilliard, projected outfielders. And then, did you know Chris Bryant was back in Colorado? Chris Bryant, the DH, projected in Colorado.
You talk about a guy that's been on a milk carton for the last 3 years.
When I saw his name, I had to make sure the year was correct. I thought, no. Yep, sure enough, he is back. I completely forgot about that. Listen, I like Tovar to a degree. Nolan Jones has some potential. Toglia at first base, there's some fantasy value there, but not much. Last year, I refused to touch Colorado. This year, I don't know that I would refuse to touch them, but I'm definitely not hunting out anybody from Colorado.
No, I'm not doing that either. And you would think that playing in Colorado. Now, this is the key to this, though, is when they're at home, there's some of these guys that you might want to look at and get on your team. But once they hit that road, you want to punt them as far away from your fantasy team as you can possibly do it. And so there's not much to like about this team at all, which really fascinates me because I've not been there, of course, but everything else, their ballpark is beautiful. I've seen fans in the stadium every single game. And why they stink this bad, this long, completely, I don't get it. It baffles me to no end that they're this bad and they have the resources that they do, and they just won't do it. I don't like it. I want to see them better, but it's maybe not in my lifetime.
Yeah, well, my sister, who does not listen to this show, she was there multiple times. She's been at that stadium many times. I believe my dad's actually been to a game or two out there too when he went out to visit her. But nonetheless, Rockies still stink, and that's just all there is to it. Let's move on to the Los Angeles
just
Dodgers.
One thing, because I looked it up. You were mentioning the Arizona Diamondbacks, okay?
Yeah.
They are a plus 3,000 to win the World Series. So put $10 down. That's $30,000.
There you go.
Okay, so they're the 15th ranked team when it comes to winning the World Series. So that
There it
makes
is.
no sense to me. And this is real time research you get on this show. So there
That's
you
right.
have it.
That's right. All right, let's go to the favorites, the Los Angeles Dodgers. Last year, 98 and 64, all kinds of health issues last season. We talked about their pitching earlier, but you got Blake Snell comes over, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Tyler Glasnow, Tony Gonsolin, Roki Suzuki, Dustin May, and some guy named Shohei Ohtani as possibilities. And you even got guys like Sheehan as a possibility there too. So we look at this starting rotation. Listen, Blake Snell, he's not as bad as Tyler Glasnow when it comes to innings pitched, but he's also not great if you look at his total stats and how many innings he pitches a season. But obviously a good addition. Shohei, if he's healthy, phenomenal. Yamamoto, another season in the major leagues. Glasnow, really good when healthy. Sasaki, we have no idea there. And then you get the guys like Gonsolin as well. So what are your thoughts on the rotation in LA?
Well, we could have, when we were talking about big impacts, Blake Snell to me is one of those guys. And so he won just 5 games. We all know the problems he had last year. That's all cleared up. And the year before, he won the Cy Young Award. That's the second one of his career. And his fall has always been his walks per 9. But anything else, and from what I saw, he was number 45 overall. So if you go in your first 3 rounds and draft hitters and get Blake Snell in the 4th round, that sets you up for success to me. So I really like him pitching in that Dodgers rotation. He's done it. He's been in the World Series, and so he won't shrink back at all from that. So I really like Blake Snell in that rotation right there. And so I never thought I would say Blake Snell and Dodgers in the same sentence before, but I really like what he's capable of doing on that team.
The bullpen looks pretty solid too. They bring in Tanner Scott. They got Blake Treinen. They've got Kirby Yates. They've got Michael Kopech. Like that. I mean, there's hard to find weaknesses in the Dodgers this season, and the bullpen doesn't seem like it's going to be a problem either.
No, it sure doesn't. Just signed, and we mentioned it before. Those 2 guys that they signed were on the free agent market for 3 months. I'm not trying to hear any crying whatsoever at anybody else. Why didn't another team sign him? They had every opportunity. And so one of those guys is going to be the closer. Scott, I'm sure, will be the guy. But there's going to be holds galore for everybody else. So I like if relief pitchers is your thing in fantasy, gang up on these Dodgers. I like what they can do.
When you look at the projected lineup for the Dodgers this year, it's stronger than last year. Shohei Ohtani at DH, Mookie Betts at short, Freddie Freeman at first base, Teoscar Hernandez in the outfield, Max Muncy at third, Will Smith at catcher, Michael Conforto joins the team at outfield, Tommy Edman resigns at outfield, and they signed this other kid, Haesung Kim, as well to play second base. And they've got some other guys. I don't think I have them listed here. Chris Taylor, Miguel Rojas. They got guys. They're not superstars, Chris Taylor and Miguel Rojas, but man, you're talking about they're your backup utility guys. Everything will be just fine. And they just signed somebody else to re-sign somebody, I think.
Hernandez.
Kike
They
Hernandez
just re-signed Kike Hernandez. So they've got every position, right? Tommy Edman can play short. He can play outfield. He batted cleanup in the World Series. So that's the kind of guy that they've got that's behind all these other guys. So this is a stacked team, obviously. And 104.5 is the win total I have for them. I don't know if that – okay, so I'm going under that. 105 wins means everything goes absolutely golden. We saw a year ago that wasn't the case. And so – I'm not going to say they're going to win 105 games. That's a whole lot to me, but they're going to approach that. But I'm going under 104 and a half.
Listen, 105 is a lot, They just got so much depth. I don't know. I think it's definitely possible. Maybe I'll go 103. So I'll go under also to play it safe. But I mean, it's definitely possible. They got all kinds of depth there as well. That'd be an upgrade obviously over last year, which things went poorly for them when it comes to health. Last season, they managed their way through it, of course, as well. So there you go. The Dodgers. Next up's the Padres. They're 93 and 69 last year. They've got guys. When I look at their pitching, Kevin, I go, these guys, it feels like they've been around for a while. They're not super old necessarily, but it feels that way. So Dylan Cease, and there's all kinds of trade talk around him. Michael King, Yu Darvish, Randy Vasquez, and Matt Waldron, the anticipated starting five. They also got a guy named Johnny Brito that you can keep an eye out for, and Joe Musgrave if he ever gets healthy as well. This is a team, if they're actively trying to trade Dylan Cease, to me that's a negative impact on this team. You like it?
If they wind up trading him, they might as well just pack all their bags up and stay in Arizona.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't like that at all. I don't like the rotation to begin with. And you mentioned it. Cease is 29, Michael King is 29, Yu Darvish is 38, Musgrove is 32. Let's see, Jason Adam is supposed to be in their bullpen. He's 33. These guys are on the wrong side of the tracks, and you're sitting there wanting all of these guys to put forth their best foot. And I'm just not. I'm not sold at all on their pitching staff at all.
I'm not as down on them as you are. I think I like Arizona better than them.
Absolutely. There's no question about it.
Yeah, in the bullpen, Robert Suarez, I love the signing of Jason Adam, or the trade. I don't remember if that was a signing or a trade, but I love that move for San Diego. Jason Adam was in Tampa. I think that's a really, really solid add to the bullpen there, but they don't have Suarez is good, but they don't have that full arsenal that you see in Arizona or in Los Angeles either. When you look at the offensive side of things, it's an intriguing thing. The projected lineup: Luis Arias at first, Fernando Tatis, Jackson Merrill in the outfield, Manny Machado at third, Jake Cronenworth at second, Bogarts at short, Tirso Ornelas in the outfield. Elias Diaz comes over at catcher. I'm intrigued to see how his fantasy value is impacted. And then Eguy Rosario at DH is the projection right now. They've also got Tyler Wade to keep an eye on and Brandon Lockridge to keep an eye on. They got some guys that it just kind of, will they get at bats? Will they find their way into the lineup kind of a thing this year? But I mean, I love Jackson Merrill. I'm big on him.
He's the youngster out of all these guys.
Yeah. The San Diego team seems like it could be a come together and be a storybook season, or it could be an absolute dumpster fire.
Right, and I agree. I don't know about absolute dumpster fire, but the golden seats aren't going to be so golden out there in San Diego this year. And you mentioned Suarez; he's 33 years old.
Yeah.
So the offense, they've got some pieces, of course, and I'm a Dodger guy. Okay, there it is. But I've watched several games of the Padres in their stadium. I know their fans support them. I know this.
Yeah.
And I expected more out of them out of the offseason than what they provided. So I think San Diego's taking a step back this year.
Well, so does Vegas. 93 wins last year. Their over-under is 87.5 this season. Like I said, I think dumpster fire would be 80 wins. I don't think they're going to go to 80 wins, but I could see them going 85, 86 wins this season.
Yeah, 87.5. I like how they set there, so you have to make a decision. So I like that a lot. 87.5, I'm going under. Okay. 87 sounds about right, maybe 86. So I'm going under on that. And 86 or 87 wins in San Diego is the definition of dumpster fire to me. I'm sure their fans they're not expecting that kind of production
Yeah.
And they get 44,000 strong every game. So,
all right, let's get to San Francisco. We're taking way longer on this than I was hoping
so
to.
yeah, we'll step it up.
It's a good conversation nonetheless. Giants 80 wins last year. They've got an old but interesting rotation. Logan Webb, Robbie Ray, Justin Verlander, Jordan Hicks is there now too. Kyle Harrison. They've got Birdsong, Hayden Birdsong still around. They've got a young guy, Tristan Beck, Keaton Wynn. Possibilities there. Joey Lucchesi. I'm not sure how you say that name, as a possibility there too. But at the top of the rotation, Logan Webb, Robbie Ray, Justin Verlander. We know those guys are a little older and seasoned vets of the game. What do you feel about the rotation in San Francisco?
Well, because I've liked Logan Webb. I've liked him for a while. He's only 28.
Okay.
These other guys, probably, one day after the arc landed on solid ground, that's where they showed up. But so I like Logan Webb. He's a guy that I think that you could draft just a little bit later, but still get a solid starter. I like him. But the rest of these guys, you got Robbie Ray. He's been hurt and everything else. Justin Verlander, we've talked about him already. So I don't like the rotation after Logan Webb at all.
I like Kyle Harrison. And if Hayden Birdsong gets put into the rotation, I actually like him a lot too. I don't know that will win a job in the rotation, so we'll wait and see on that one. But I like Birdsong and I like Kyle Harrison because, again, the value is good. I mean, you're getting them late. The value is really good there. So I do like those guys. Bullpen wise, they still have Tyler Rogers, whose twin brother got traded to Cincinnati. They still have Camilo Doval and this Ryan Walker. If you're a relief guy, people are jumping head first into Ryan Walker in the bullpen for San Francisco this year. So he's probably a value that I'm not going to be willing to take a swing on, but I like him. And I think there's a lot of potential in San Francisco this year for this bullpen to be pretty decent as well. Any thoughts on the bullpen in San Fran?
Well, it comes down to Doval, as you mentioned. Everything looks good. 5-3, 23 saves. He's 27 years old. Then you look at his ERA, though, 4.88. That is death if that is your closer's ERA. And so he's going to have to bring that down 2 full runs to be effective. I don't know if he's going to be able to do that or not. He's pitching in the right ballpark to make that happen. And so if he can do what he can do, Rogers, as you mentioned, had a 2.82 ERA, so I like that. But Duval's got to do far better than that to have any kind of impact positively on this team.
Well, and Ryan Walker is the closer. I mean, that's everything's coming out. It's Ryan Walker's job. So Doval is going to be more of a holds guy this year.
Well, still 4.88 and wherever he's pitching,
dangerous.
not getting it done.
Dangerous in a bad way. The projected lineup, Jung-Hoo Lee, who did not do what we hoped he would do last year. Willie Adames over from Milwaukee. Lamont Wade, who could lose his job halfway through the season to a young guy coming up. We will see on that. Matt Chapman back at third. Tyler Fitzgerald at second. Mike Yastrzemski at outfield. Helio Ramos at outfield as well. Wilmer Flores, the projected DH, and Patrick Bailey back at catcher. And then also, I think Gerard Encarnacion will get more opportunity at DH this year as well. Might see him in the field some, but mostly at DH probably. But as we get through the season, I'll bring up a name to you later in the season to watch in San Francisco to come up and get some playing time. Because I think there's a young guy in San Francisco that's going to be really, really good once he gets his opportunity.
You'd like to see more out of Helio Ramos?
Yeah.
He's a younger guy. He's showing some flashes, but I like to see more out of him. And this lineup, it's the worst in the division.
Well, outside of Colorado, right?
Well, at least in Colorado, they get buoyed up a little bit because they play in Colorado.
Okay.
So maybe they can figure out whether they could throw more snowballs at each other in Colorado or more, or more bun balls in San Francisco, whatever it is. But this is not a winning lineup to me. And so the pitching, I'm not big on. Their hitting, not big on. So if it wasn't for Colorado, San Francisco would be bringing up the rear in this division.
They are
Sorry
void
to
of
your dad
power.
on that.
They're void of power. Matt Chapman's there, of course. Adames comes in as well to bring some power. Ramos can bring power. Willie's the question. I really like Tyler Fitzgerald a lot. I like him better when he's multiple position eligible, but nonetheless, I'm not big on Wade. Jung-Hoo Lee has potential. We will see. But you're right. The rest of those guys, Yastrzemski's past his time. Bailey has yet to produce, what he could produce. And Flores never gets me excited at DH. So yeah, intriguing take for sure. All right, that's our NL West.
So we going over under 80.5.
Oh yeah, sorry. Thank you for that. Yeah, last year they won 80 games, and this year's over under is at 79.5.
Well, 79.5 is what you have. I had 80.5. All right, 79.5 it is then.
All right, so I'll go over 79.5.
They'll do 80.
Okay, so you'll go.
That's
over
what I'm going to say. So it's not like we're woohoo on this one. It's 1 over 80. If it was 80.5, I'd go under. But 79, I'm going little bit, just the slightest hair over.
All right. Our hot corner presented by Righteous Felon Jerky. Use code BELLYUP for 15% off your purchase. All right. We're already over an hour, and we haven't even got to our rankings yet, but we're getting there next. This is the segment we call our Fantasy Focus. Fantasy Focus is presented by SeatGeek. Go to SeatGeek.com to get your tickets to your Major League Baseball games. Our friend Brent Radlitzky is trying to go to 30 ballparks this season.
I saw that.
He'll be using SeatGeek. Use the code BELLYUPSPORTS. Get $20 off your first purchase. We are ranking shortstops today, as I assumed we were going to get raked over the coals with our second base rankings last week. We did to a degree. They were wrong, but they definitely did not agree with us last week. So I'm intrigued to see how
it's really interesting to me that whatever comment was that you made got absolutely blitzkrieged. And so it was interesting for me to see that. Gotta love the Reddit contributors over there, and most of them. Some of them, this is trash. This is garbage. We don't. That adds nothing. So bring on the firepower a little more than that. All right.
As I responded to the person who said this is a trash thing, I just said thank you for your your positive critique here and all your help. All right, let's get into shortstops.
All right. I think we're going to be a little more in agreement on this one. I have a feeling.
I'm intrigued to see if that's true, to be honest with you, Kevin. Number one shortstop, I've got Bobby Witt Jr. from Kansas City.
That's, one of the easiest, out of all these rankings we're going to do, Bobby Witt, he's a top 3 player in baseball.
Yeah.
And he's only 24 years old.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing not to like about this guy. And he's got to be at the top of your rankings. And if you're a little later, because if you're past 4, I'm going to say you're not getting Bobby Witt. And but don't despair, because there are some solid selections that come after him. But he's easily, to me, the number 1 guy.
Yeah, number 1 at shortstop, and I haven't done my full rankings yet, but I think I probably have him top 2 in my overalls as well.
He's 3 at the outside.
Yeah. All right, Mookie Betts number 2. Are you on board with that?
I'm totally on board with that. The shortstop and the outfield boosts him up. If there was any kind of discussion to have about this, shortstop and outfield pushes him right up to the 2nd spot.
All right. Who do you have at number 3?
Number 3, I've got Gunnar Henderson.
Okay.
In Baltimore. He simply because he's not the strikeout magnet that number 4 is. I'm sure you already know who I'm speaking of right there. But he's played 159 games. He does it all. home runs, RBIs, everything else you could possibly ask for out of a shortstop, even more. He's a guy that's going to come off the board. These are 3 shortstops that are top one, the first round picks,
Yeah.
all of these guys. And so if you get any of these, you're going to be super happy.
I mean, I'm a huge Gunnar Henderson fan. And it was hard for me to put him at 3 just because I love him so much. But that's where he slotted in behind Witt and Betts. I really, really like Gunnar Henderson a whole lot.
And he's 23.
Yeah.
That's the exciting part about him.
Yes, indeed. All right. And a reminder, these are points leagues is how we're ranking.
That's right. Points leagues, because somebody asked that in the Reddit, and we're sorry we didn't make that clear. Yes, points leagues is what we're talking about here.
All right. Number 4 strikeout magnet is
Elly De La Cruz. Okay. And the strikeouts is what he had. He led the league in 218. That's far too many for a shortstop, but that's the only negative that he has. And you're going to have to take him warts and all. But even so, I'm putting him in the number 4 spot because he can steal bases. He can hit home runs. He can, hit inside the park home runs. He can do everything. And so if it wasn't for the strikeouts, he'd be a lot closer to Gunnar Henderson. But the strikeouts do matter, especially in points league. So I put him at number 4.
So I do not have Elly De La Cruz at number 4. I've got him at number 5 behind Francisco Lindor.
Okay. There's certainly, you make your argument. Make your argument. I
think the addition of retaining Pete Alonso, bringing in Juan Soto is only going to help Lindor. Lindor had a really, really good year last year.
He did.
He had 273, 33 home runs, 29 stolen bases, 466 fantasy points. And Elly De La Cruz, as great as he's going to be or can be, as electric as he is, as young as he is, he's got to stay on the ball field. And so I had De La Cruz 5th because of potential, but the reality is he's not been able to do what he needs to do consistently yet. So I got Lindor actually easily at 4 for me, and De La Cruz as a little bit of a I put him at 5 because of his potential, but I almost dropped him even down to 6. So is Lindor 5 for you?
Lindor is easily slides into the number 5 slot for me. The only reason why he's a little older, and but everything else is golden when it comes to him. He was in the running for NL MVP last year. I like what he can do, and he's a guy that you can get maybe a round or so later than these other guys that we just talked about. So if you wind up with Francisco Lindor, you probably have to take a 2nd round pick to get him, but you're going to be set at short if you get him.
So last season, Lindor and Elly De La Cruz had the exact same amount of at-bats. Okay, exact same amount, 618 at-bats. Very similar runs, 107 to 105. Lindor slight advantage. Home runs, 33 for Lindor, 25 for De La Cruz. RBIs, 91 for Lindor, 76 for De La Cruz. Walks, De La Cruz gets that one, 69. Lindor, 56. Strikeouts, Lindor, 127. De La Cruz, 218. For me, that's now stolen bases. De La Cruz, 67. 29 for Lindor. So there's a big plus for sure for De La Cruz. To me, Lindor is just consistent, more consistent than Elly De La Cruz. So for me, he's a safer pick at number 4. But if you're dynasty or if you're wanting to be flashy, you love these young guys, Elly De La Cruz is the guy. To me, Lindor is just better than him still at this point in his career.
Like I said, he's more steady.
Yeah,
he's definitely steady. And that's a lot of negative points for the strikeouts. So
yeah.
At some point, you think that he's going to get that because he's 23 as well. Maybe he can get that harness just a little bit.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Well,
he's got
when it comes to ceilings, nobody's got a higher ceiling, I don't think, out of all of these guys than Elly De La Cruz. So
and he has a new manager that is a really good baseball manager. So If anything, he takes a little bit of a step forward because of that too, as well. All right, now I'm intrigued to see 6 through 10 because I have no idea if we're going to be exactly the same or completely different. So let's start off with number 6. Who do you have at number 6?
At number 6, I've got Trea Turner of the Philadelphia Phillies. And even though he's 31, and he's taken a step back since he's come to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
But I still think that at his best, he can put it together a little better than some of these guys that come up after him. And I like the lineup that he's in. I like the ballpark he plays in. And so I'm sliding Trea Turner in at number 6.
All right. So I'm going to go through my rankings in a second. I'm going to let you go through 10 here in just a second.
Okay.
But Trea Turner is, I've lost faith in Trea Turner. Having said that, I think I'm not the only one, and his fantasy value and his draft value is going to plummet, which is going to make him a really great pick for a lot of people this year as well. But I'll save the rest of my thoughts on Trea Turner for a moment. So number 6, you have Trea Turner. Number 7, who do you have?
At number 7, I've got Corey Seager of the downtown Texas Rangers. And the only reason why he's a top 5 guy, but he can't stay healthy.
Yeah.
Because last year he only played 123 games, plus he turned on the wrong side of 30. And but he still hit 30 home runs.
Yeah.
And so you've got to take that when it comes to value, and this has anything to do with value. I'm not willing to take him as early as you're going to need to get him. But at his best, he's clearly one of the best shortstops in the game. So I think that he's going to be a little more healthy this year. So I slid him in at number 7.
All right. Number 8.
Number 8 is Willy Adames, and we've just talked about him. And he was a guy that could be a little higher, but his surroundings I don't like. And but who else could hit 32 home runs?
Right.
So I've got him at number 8. At number 9, you might be surprised at this, but
Okay,
I've got O'Neal Cruz of the Pittsburgh Pirates here. And before you rake me over the coals, 72 runs, 21 home runs, 22 stolen bases. And if this is a big if he could ever get it straight over there in Pittsburgh, he could have a big season at 26 years old. I like what he can possibly do. And he's a guy that you can draft later and still get the value out of your shortstop position. So I've got him at number 9.
Yeah, I don't dislike that one, Kevin. I don't have him in my top 10, but I kind of see him as a 12, 13, 14 rank kind of thing, and a late, if you need a shortstop late, he's also outfield eligible as he's playing, I think, mainly center field this year. So I think, there's a place for him on my fantasy team. I'll put it that way. I don't have him ranked that high, but I also don't hate it at the same time. Number 10 for you.
Number 10 is Bo Bichette of Toronto.
Okay.
And he's got to play more than 81 games this year. I think that's in him. I like their lineup. So I think he's going to step that up because he's played in 159 and 159 games 2 years in a row. So I think he straightens that out a bit, but not enough for me to move him up higher in my rankings. So at number 10, Bo Bichette. I'm a little, it's not like both feet are in the water, but I've got one at least in there. So I think that his floor is pretty high.
Okay.
So if he could stay healthy, I like what he can provide.
Sure. Yeah, I'll talk about him more in a moment. So our top 8 are the same guys, little slightly different order. I've got Corey Seager 6. Health is everything for him. If he's at all healthy, if he can get 150 games, he'll easily be the 6th best shortstop there, I think. I've got Adames 7th in San Francisco. Power's a big deal for him. Intrigued to see what he's like in a new stadium, in a new setting and everything like that as well. I got Trea Turner 8th on this list, and I think Reddit Reddit viewers are going to see this as too high. I think they're going to see 6 as too high for Trea Turner. I think that's going to be the ones they're not going to like. They don't have to like it though.
No,
That's
they
where
don't.
we see it at
They
as
don't.
well. Number 9, I got CJ Abrams in Washington. And I'll just say number 10, I've got Jeremy Pena in Houston. These were 2 guys I was trying to figure out where I was going to put them at. Abrams' age and his numbers to this degree is why I put him ahead of Jeremy Pena. I like both of these guys at this range. And, I couldn't put Bobby Witt in my top 10, but we'll get to him more in just a second. But I really like CJ Abrams. I like what Washington is doing as well. And they've got some young guys. We'll get to them in the outfield position, I'm sure. I think CJ Abrams has that potential to take a huge step forward and become a top 8, maybe even a top 6 shortstop in fantasy baseball if he reaches his full potential this year. But I like him in my top 10. Jeremy Pena in Houston has been solid. He's been a little bit more of a waiver, well, not even a waiver wire guy, but late draft, and doing enough to stay on your roster, but not doing enough to make you excited about drafting him again next year. But I've got Pena ahead of Bichette in my rankings because I think he's going to play a whole lot more games than Bichette is the reason I have him there. And I got him ahead of O'Neal Cruz just because I think he's going to be more consistent than O'Neal Cruz. But I like both those guys that you have on your list that I don't have on mine. What are your thoughts on Abrams and Pena?
Well, as far as Abrams is concerned, you mentioned about a player that you'll never, ever, ever, ever have on your fantasy team. I had him. I drafted him last year. And you talk about a guy who took the elevator straight to the bottom. Because remember, he was the guy who in Chicago stayed up all night until 6 or was it 8 o'clock in the morning? I forget, one of those two. And they had a day game at 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
And so he is non grata in the Wilson household. I will have absolutely nothing to do with CJ Abrams ever again. And so he's 24, but still 24 is old enough to know better. There's no excuse for what he did. So therefore, I will have nothing to do with CJ Abrams ever again, ever.
I will tell you who my number 11 is that I really wanted to put in my top 10, but I just couldn't. And that's Mason Winn in St. Louis. Another young guy, had a really good season last year. Hits the ball hard. He's got 32 doubles last year, only 15 home runs. I'd like to see more speed out of him. He's only had 11 stolen bases last year. I really like Mason Winn, though, and his potential. I would probably draft Winn ahead of Pena. And I would be really hard. Basically, that Abrams Pena Winn setting is where I'm going to get in my draft if I don't have a shortstop yet. And I'm going to say, okay, which of these 3 guys do I trust the most? And right now it's CJ Abrams. But if St. Louis starts playing decent baseball, I'm going to start liking Mason Winn a whole lot more.
Yeah, you'd figure him playing for St. Louis would be a bond, but it isn't. And I like his potential a whole lot. And so if he could step it up just a little bit, I like what he can do. And so I'm not hating on that pick whatsoever.
All right, let's get into best values at shortstop. I'll start with mine because it's guys we've already talked about. So I've got Trea Turner and Bichette as my best values because I think Trea Turner, again, I think a lot of people are going to kind of forget about him. He didn't play great last year, and people, he was one of these top shortstops going into the last year, and just he didn't turn out to be one of the top shortstops. So I think his value has lowered tremendously, which makes him very, very, very entertaining for me to grab at some point later in the draft. And Bichette's the same way. If he is healthy, someone's going to get a steal when they draft Bichette. And if he turns out to be what he was last year, then they're going to get a dumpster fire. But if he is healthy right now, you can steal Bichette. And if he gets traded, you're going to get there's so much possibility with Bichette that I think he is one of the best value shortstops because he has dropped down to everyone's boards, and you're going to be able to get him at a really, really good value.
Okay, I would hope so, but I think that when it comes to Bo Bichette, the name, I don't think people have forgotten him nearly as much as you might think, and so I think someone's going to take him a little earlier. But the guy that I have is my value is Xavier Edwards.
Hmm.
Okay, even though he's 25, he only played in 70 games. Okay, stole 31 bases though. And so he is on nobody's radar, but he hit 328 in 70 games. So if he's a guy that, he hits in that lineup that you don't want to have any exposure to at all, but if you can get somebody later in the draft, I like what Xavier Edwards possibly could do.
Not a bad pick. It would have to be a second shortstop or a third
Absolutely.
shortstop.
I'm not,
For sure.
no, not advocating him to be your starting shortstop.
Yeah.
Okay? Not saying
Yeah.
that, but as a value, I think that really could be somebody you can look into.
I like it. All right, worst value. And honestly, Kevin, I almost left this blank. I sat here and I looked, where these shortstops are going. I actually think this year we've got it pretty well right overall, but I did end up coming up with the name. But do you have a worst value shortstop?
I do, and that's Anthony Volpe of the
Okay.
New York Yankees. Even though he's 23, it's only 23, but he's been around a few years now. He is what he is. 243 last year. It was 209 the year before. He's never going to be a top flight hitter at all. He can hit you some home runs, but it went from 21 down to 12. And so I don't like where his trajectory is going right there. And even though he's only 23, I just don't like that. You should like him in that Yankees lineup, but I don't. They've given him every opportunity to hit up higher in the lineup, but he just hasn't been able to bring it home. So as a value, I don't like what he can bring to your team at all.
Okay. The guy that I think is overvalued for this season at shortstop, so therefore bad value, is Carlos Correa in Minnesota. I've been a Correa guy. Last year he hit 310, but he wasn't on the field enough for it to matter really. 14 home runs, 0 stolen bases. I need a shortstop that's going to get me more than that. Last year he had 251 fantasy points. If he can stay healthy, he'll do more than that. But I just think at the value that he's at right now, I'd rather go with those guys that we've talked about, the Abrams, the O'Neill Cruz, the Mason Winns, those kind of guys over Carlos Correa. And right now he's slotting in between O'Neill Cruz, Dansby Swanson, Mason Winn, Bo Bichette, Tommy Edman, those kinds of guys. To me, I'll be shocked if I have Carlos Correa on any of my fantasy teams this year. And if I did, then I messed something up in my draft process.
Yeah, if I can tell you right now, if he's on my team, I hit the wrong button.
I love it.
Yeah, so
I love it.
I want nothing whatever to do with Carlos Correa.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, man, we're way over. So let's do this. What do you got going on this week, Kevin? What are you putting out on bellyupsports.com this week?
I'm thinking that I'm going to put out some stuff because the NHL is on their break, so I might take an NHL midseason, even though it's really not midseason, but close enough. Review of what's happened. I think that I might put out an article, the way too early Super Bowl odds for next year.
Okay,
we'll see about that, and you never know what could sneak in there on the baseball side of things, and so there are all kinds of different ways I could go, and as soon as it shows up, you'll know which way that will turn out to be.
All right, and of course you follow him on X at Kevin.
Absolutely,
WILSEA. Where everything will get shared as well, but you can get all those articles on bellyupsports.com. This week for the Sports Stove, me and Dad will be recapping the Super Bowl Wednesday night, and we're going to be talking about quarterbacks in the draft, as well as looking ahead to just some offseason storylines. There's plenty of things out there right now going on with that. Then this week I'll be hosting the Belly Up Sports NASCAR Super Show leading into the Daytona 500. Got a great interview with Bob Pockris from Fox Sports as well in that show. So that'll come out Friday night. That'll come out as well. So looking forward to that dropping. And then next week, me and Kevin will be back to talk more fantasy baseball. We will be doing our third base rankings next week, which I have not yet. I've got four. I think I have 5 guys on my list currently. I've just been struggling to fill out that top 10 list so far for third base, but we'll get to that next week. We'll be previewing more teams. I believe we're doing the AL Central next week as our team preview. And so more team previews, more Major League Baseball news and everything as well. So if you miss any part of the show, please go back and listen. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcast to the Belly Up Fantasy Live Baseball Show. You can also catch the episode in its entirety on the Belly Up Sports YouTube channel, which you should be subscribed to anyhow, because there's a lot of great content.
Subscribe, hit the like button, hit a if you want to put out a message, feel free to do so. Chat, whatever it is, bring it, we'll respond.
Awesome. All right. Shout out to our sponsors, Belly Up Sports, Righteous Felon Jerky, and Seat Geek. That's it for this week, friends. We're in full baseball mode now.
That's right.
So plenty to talk about in the weeks to come. Alec Bregman will sign at some point, so we'll talk about that whenever that comes.
Yeah, the plane has actually taken off from the runway, so we are fully in flight. Baseball is fully in flight now.
Yes, and unlike that joke's probably too soon. We'll hold off on that. All right, friends. Thanks for tuning in to the night's edition of the Belly Up Fantasy Live Baseball Show. We'll see you next week. Keep swinging. Until then.
Have a great week.